So our next storyteller, Barb Manson, is no stranger to the stage and the committee. And this year, it's a bit of a diversion. She's sharing a very personal story with us. And it's a personal story about her growing up as a young woman, in a large family, growing up as a young woman in a large family in Slab Town. So, welcome, Barb. Those of you that don't know where Slab Town is, I'm sorry for you, but
Doesn't matter how many times I do this, I still get nervous. I wasn't sure what to title my story this time. And this is the first time I've done a personal story, so it was a real reflection on my life. I did choose number 7, Slab Town Life. But I also thought of It's All in the Genes, spelled Genes, or a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll. So after I tell you my story, maybe you can decide which one fits best. Okay. Try the other way. And our techie guys gone? I don't know.
you just have to be holding your mouth the way. Stand on one foot.
Oh, there we go. Now he took it away. I don't have any commercials for you. Okay. Okay. It was a blinding whiteout. The roads almost impassable. The temperature well below freezing when I decided to make my entrance into this world. Being born under the sign of Aquarius, the water bearer, I came out swimming. My mom didn't even make it into the delivery room when her water broke while on the hospital bed, and out I came, almost falling off the bed. What a grand entrance that was, my independence showing even on my first day on earth. I was born on Wednesday, February 16th, 1955, at the Lake of the Woods District General Hospital, the 7th child of Elgit Schroeder and Elsie Christensen, who were first-generation Canadians. All 4 of my grandparents, and check out these names, Otto and Matilda Schroeder and Ingeborg and Valdemar Christensen, were born in Sweden and immigrated to this area. My parents named me Barbara Ann Lois Schroeder after Barbara Ann Scott, the Canadian Olympic figure skater. My mom and dad lived in Laclue with 6 of their 8 children, but when mom became pregnant with me, after she walked around the block 16 times when she realized she was having another child, we all moved to Keewatin. We lived at the very, very far west end of Keewatin, then called Slab Town, due to a sawmill that produced slabs in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Today, this area is called West Bay. My memories of growing up in Slab Town are filled with the sights, sounds, and smells of country living. Our house was situated as such that we had the Winnipeg River in our front yard and the Lake of the Woods, Mink Bay area in our backyard with the train tracks in between. My first memories include the sound of the train whistle as the train raced by, the earthy smell of the Winnipeg River, and the glorious sunset at the end of the day. We had just a few neighbors, the Moores, Farthings, Barnards, Brookers, Murphys, Wadmans, and Gillies. The Barnards had chickens and a rooster, and a 200-pound black pot-belly pig. If we weren't riding that pig and falling into the mud, we were being pecked on the back of our legs by that big old rooster protecting his hens, as we did at the mad dash across the barnyard yard to our swimming hole. The chickens and the pigs disappeared every fall as they were harvested, and new ones arrived every spring. As children, we did not realize what was happening to our pets and gave them the same names every year. No indoor plumbing, black and white TV, The Ed Sullivan Show, Saturday Night Hockey, and Bonanza on the telly. Rotary dial, black honky phone, sitting on a hinge shelf that actually swung from our kitchen into my mom and dad's bedroom. Big veggie gardens and lots of swimming, watching the sturgeon roll over in the sunlight during the day, and hearing the frogs and crickets at night chirping away. Lying in the long grass, swatting the mosquitoes, and staring up at that night sky full of stars so close we thought we could touch them. Fishing off the dock or swimming to Gravelin's Island, situated in the middle of the river, and pretending we were pirates hoarding our gold. Playing paper cutout dolls with the Elliott girls, Donna and Debbie, and getting in trouble with the Smith kids, all 10 of them, from that other West Bay, just east of us. In the winter, I would actually drag my nieces down the railway tracks, how we all survived, I'm not sure, so we could slide down the very steep embankment, which was almost vertical, to a frozen swamp below. I started a club for my nieces and nephews called the Secret Smiling Society. We created individual art books and stories and pictures, and we had adventures in the wild. I spent a lot of time being a mother hen to all my nieces and nephews, 19 of them, some only a few years older than me. Putting pennies on the tracks just before the train went by to flatten them and make them into penny necklaces. Waiting for the low road to flood so we could actually jump on the backs of the snapping turtles with a large stick held out in front so they had something to snap at instead of us. Playing in the old sawdust pile with its foxholes and hidden caves, canoeing and water skiing, cross-country skiing, skating on the river, ice fishing and snowmobiling, all activities we got to enjoy while growing up in Slab Town. Our house was the gathering place for local parties, and they always consisted of homegrown music. Cousin Hilding Fredrickson on the accordion, Tom Elliott on the guitar and mouth harmonica, the Gilly sisters, Irene and Gladys, playing guitars and singing, and I loved to tap dance to whatever they were playing. Some of my fondest memories were the neighborly jamming sessions. Then there was the painting of our names on the tunnel wall as a rite of passage. The long walks to Kuwait Public School. I thought it was like 20 miles. It's 10 minutes. Down this dark, scary road with dense forests on either side, a great hiding place for the older kids to scare the younger ones. I remember dragging one of my nieces to school every day, and I mean dragging. Her nickname was Moose the Stubborn One. As soon as we got her to school, she would run all the way back home. Some of my teachers included Mrs. Barnard, Mrs. Saunders, Mrs. Meridew, and Mrs. Magnuson at the Kuwaitan Public School. It was still the time when using the strap was acceptable. In one particular class, we were told to all line up outside the classroom and put our palms out. This teacher gave us all a good whack with the strap so we would know what it felt like. We were all saints in her class. My all-time favorite teacher was Mr. Jim Irish, who was always doing these crazy scientific experiments to keep us all interested, and he gave me my love of school. Recess, we all snuck out to Moore's pasture, just beyond the school's property line, 85 acres of forest and trails to play in. And I will not tell you what I did. My sister Linda, my brother Al, and I were the only 3 left at home by this time. My oldest brother Doug had gotten married when I was 2 years old, and my brother was just a baby. Doug moved in next door to us in Slab Town, and brother Al came home into the house one day wanting to know why that guy next door kept telling him what to do. No one had ever thought to tell him he was his brother. 20 years between my youngest and my oldest brother. Growing up, everyone actually thought my brother Doug was my father. My other siblings were Judy, Linda, Sandra, Valerie, Terry, and then me and brother Al. Apparently, I was the little princess, and Alan was just trouble. We nicknamed him Little Joe off the Cartwrights, and he lived up to that name, always in trouble. Some of his exploits included putting us poor girls' heads down into the outhouse seats, putting our hands in red ant piles to see if we're tough enough to endure the bites. He would blow up frogs using blades of grass, put spiders down our shirts, and even put a dead skunk in my sister Linda's bed. And this is what he looked like. When he couldn't get his way, he would actually hold his breath until he turned blue and pass out. We would all panic, my mom would walk away. But the worst thing he did was when my dad had finished building the second story of our house. He had built a bathroom for when running water would be available. Dad put a slop pail in that room to use at night, so we wouldn't have to go outside to use the outhouse. Alan poured the slop pail down the furnace vent. The smell was horrific, and every time the furnace came on, you could smell that smell for a very long time. But for all the shenanigans, you just had to love him, our little Joe. My dad was a very quiet, hard-working man who did his best for his family. I knew he loved my older siblings, but he was in his 60s when my brother and I were young, and I wondered if he loved me just as much. He never called me by name. So one day I asked him, "Dad, do you know my name?" "Yeah," he says in a Swedish accent, "you're number 7. As he walked away smiling, I loved his quiet demeanor and his sense of humor, I think. Life was never dull in our house. One night I was doing my schoolwork and lying on the kitchen floor. Dad had just put in the 3 kitchen windows facing the tracks, but had not fastened them securely. A train went by, and the vibration from the train loosened them until they crashed on top of me on the kitchen floor. Luckily I was not hurt, just frightened half to death. Another night, a really terrible storm pelted the area. The winds were wild, the rain pelting down, when there was this very loud crack as lightning hit the extraordinary large poplar tree outside my bedroom window. It crashed right into my bedroom, destroying part of the roof and breaking my window. I woke up from a dead sleep, and I thought that that night monster that's living under my bed had finally gotten me. Downtown Kuwait probably heard my screams that night. The one event that changed my life forever was when, in grade 9, came home to find our wonderful home engulfed in flames. Dad's dream house had burnt to the ground. My dad, a carpenter by trade, had finally finished the house when our furnace blew up and destroyed his dream. Being a teenager, my only thought was, oh my God, what do I wear to school tomorrow? Donna Pitt was one of my friends at that time, and Mr. Pitt was so kind to outfit me with clothes from his store for school. The community rallied around our family in our time of need. Our wonderful, adventure-filled, carefree life in Slab Town had come to an abrupt end. Our house was not insured, so we had to move into a rental home in downtown Kuwait. Dad never spoke for almost 2 years. He was a broken man, and our serene, carefree life was over. It may have been bittersweet to say goodbye to Slab Town, but it also opened up many more doors for my life path. From this experience, I learned that things are just that, things, and you could be stronger than you ever thought possible. I learned the generosity of a small town. I learned to be humble and thankful, and I learned to stand tall. It was now the 70s, the age of Aquarius and the women's movement, and my personal liberation from small town girl into a blossoming woman ready for the big world was in full swing. As with everything, I hit this time of my life full bore. My first act as a liberated woman was at high school. We were the first women ever allowed to wear pants to school. The boys showed their displeasure by wearing kilts to school the first day we wore pants. I also belonged to a group of girls, and excuse the language, called the Itty Bitty Titty Committee. And we went overnight camping on an island and we burnt our bras. We felt so liberated, went to school the next day without them, and no one noticed. We were the first group of girls allowed to play girls' football, called powder puff football. And yes, the Lakewood girls beat the Beaver Bay girls, our high school rivals. The worst part is we had to wear the guys' stinky uniforms on a very rainy day that had turned into a mud fest. We were always thinking of ways to rule the boys' world. Sadie Hawkins was big back then, when girls asked the boys out. Terrifying but very liberating, because you got to choose who you wanted to go out with. And luckily, most never said no. Both the girls and boys were in competitive high school gymnastics, and on one road trip, I decided I wanted to learn how to play poker, just like the boys did. Well, needless to say, I left them penniless and earned the nickname Shark. Everyone had nicknames back then. And somebody asked me somebody's real name, and I couldn't even remember what the real name was because everybody went by these kinds of nicknames. Bubbles, Spinner, Coletti Andretti, Scooter, Groceries, Wolfie, Preacher, Rat, Dizzy Izzy, Farmer, Boomer, and Sugar Bear, to name a few. When graduation came, the women thought we should have the choice of wearing a prom dress or not, but we were overruled on this one. So in spite of that, we wore our jeans under our prom dresses because we wanted to be ready for the party after. Then a new reality hit me. School's over. No money for university, so work it had to be. I was actually the first woman hired to work in a liquor store in northwestern Ontario. A good paying job and living in Keewatin. Who could ask for anything more? Well, so I thought. My big brother Terry saw the potential I had, and he had other plans for me. He picked me up from school one day, early in September. He had packed my bags and put me on a plane to London, Ontario. He had enrolled me in Western University and paid for my semester. Talk about culture shock, but my brother had given me the opportunity to open my wings and fly. This act of selflessness by my brother opened up another whole new world for me. I did get to spread my wings. I got to soak up knowledge. I got to see a different future for myself. I was liberated again. I had many jobs during my youth. My very first one at the age of 12, I actually stocked shelves at Horwood's store in Keewatin after school for a whopping 10 cents a day. Then I worked at Woolworths during my high school years and was working there when the unknown bank robber robbed the Bank of Commerce. After high school, I worked at the Keewatin liquor store. I also worked at the Kenora jail while I was going to university, which was an experience in itself. After university, I worked for the town of Keewatin for 5 years and then the city of Kenora for 25 years. I worked my way from the bottom up to the position of park supervisor, the position I retired from earlier this year. During my time with the city, due in part to the women's movement, there were many changes within the city, resulting in many of the upper level positions being filled by women. I was not actively involved in the women's movement, but it just swept me along with it. Pay equity was introduced while I worked at the city and helped to solidify my career with a good paying job. I was allowed to flourish within the city's organization and was pleased to be involved in many wonderful projects, including trail development, parks development, the Communities in Bloom campaign, and the one that still touches my heart the most, the Ice Candle Festival lights at the Lake of the Woods Cemetery. A beautiful legacy to be able to leave the whole community. Now, my mother always said to me, don't you marry one of those Norman boys, and don't you dare move to Kenora. Well, of course I did both. After a failed first marriage, I met the love of my life, Charles Manson Jr., and yes, I asked him out. Chuck filled my life in many ways, and we continue to share many adventures together. Chuck introduced me to camping, concert going at the age of 35, Harley riding, gun club activities, and my love of traveling. Chuck says, sorry dear, there's nothing sexier than a woman in leather on a Harley who owns a gun and who looks just as fine in silk satin and lace. We eloped when we got married, and we actually got married in a gazebo on the side of a mountain in Banff, Alberta, and then went horseback riding in the mountains after. I told Chuck the day we got married that I would be good in one room of the house. You can pick it. Needless to say, I don't cook much. At Christmas one year, I drove up to his work in a stretch limo, wearing nothing but a borrowed real fur coat. My plan was to take him on a ride around town in the limo, looking for Christmas lights, and then had booked a room in a local hotel for the night. Well, the whole ride, I was squirming in my seat, and I felt weird, and what is going on? So we got to our room, and I removed the fur coat. I was covered in hives. So much for a romantic getaway. Now, my husband has a kind of an infamous name, Charles Manson. And one day in the fall, there was a bear in our neighborhood. So everybody's telling bear stories, I have to tell mine. And the police came, and at that time, they would shoot bears within a residential area. And we heard 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots, 6 shots. The 7th shot went through my front door, down the hallway, and into my bathroom. So they had a complete investigation about what happened, and they no longer shoot in town. And this is not a fish story. This is the outcome of an investigation. The bullet went through the bear, bounced off a sidewalk, crossed the street, ricocheted off a hose, up my stairs, through the door, down the hall, and into the bathroom. Fish story. And the best part was, my sister was living down east, and she sends me this newspaper, and it's one of those rags. And it said in the front, police shoot at Charles Manson's house. Having my children brought out the mother bear in me. It was devastating to lose my firstborn, Billy Joe, but I was fortunate enough to have 2 healthy sons, Dylan James Otto and Colt Algot Charles. Yes, I put Swedish names in there, poor names. When I had my children, we were one of the first generations to actually work full-time in a career away from home while raising our children. It was quite the balancing act, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. And our family continues on today with 3 lovely grandchildren, Marshall and Jet and Ayla. Their life paths will be very different from mine, and it will be very interesting to see them emerge into who they are meant to be. In the cycle of life, death can be one of the most complex to understand. Losing my firstborn made me cherish my next 2 sons even more. When my parents passed away, it was a revelation to realize I was now the older generation. This is still very weird to me. A big family can endure many losses, but when my oldest brother committed suicide, I was totally devastated and thrown off kilter. He made this choice rather than put his family through a long terminal cancer-related illness. What lesson could I possibly learn from this? Well, I am now an advocate for dying with dignity, which allows terminal patients the legal right to assisted dying. Even the hard lessons can be turned into something positive. My older sisters, Judy, Linda, Sandy, and Val, paved the path for my liberation. They showed me love, compassion, and were always my cushion when life threw me curveballs. I watched them, each on their own life path, and learned different lessons from each one of them. Unbeknownst to them, they were my life teachers and gave me the strength to carry on when life got down. They were and are my guiding angels. New adventures now await me. I'm retired. I plan to learn carpentry, dabble in photography, and research my genealogical background further. My roots have always been important to me. I believe I was born with Viking blood, became a life warrior, and I have found my Valhalla here on earth. A journey of serenity, normalcy, great adventure, and excruciating sadness. But this small town, wide-eyed little girl from Slab town blossomed into this liberated woman with a small town heart who stayed true to her upbringing and flourished into this independent, still a little bit country, woman you see before you today. Everyone's life path leads them on a journey to who they are meant to be. And I found out, I am me. I am woman, hear me roar. Thank you.